Yo guys, this is Reinhardt, it's your favorite Russian talking. Today we're going to be talking about the decay changes. There was a lot of people asking me questions. I promised a vlog, so there's a vlog. Sorry for the delay. To my stream viewers, had a few things I need to patch up. But anyway, let's get into the actual changes. So first of all, what I see here is something that what we call, my friends, beautiful. And the beautiful, a lot of shit is beautiful here. The rotation changes and everything else. Yes, the complexity, some of the complexities vanishes. Like, for example, all the runes are going to be the same rune. Death rune, from what I understand. I'm not sure which rune they actually going to pick it, but it doesn't matter. So, each class, each spec got their specific stuff. And we're going to talk about the actual rotations, the setups, the differences between the three specs. And we're going to tie it up saying that, hey, the tie-up, actually I'm going to make it now. The tie-up is very simple, not enough information, okay? I'll try to do my best to get the beta, open beta, when I actually can talk about the changes and everything else, what I like, what I don't like. But for now, from what I'm seeing here, is that I see a lot of changes. Keep in mind that all of this is still, there's a few abilities I'm missing that are kind of a question to me. The second thing here is, this is just a smidget of information, because there's also a PP talents that we're gonna have, there's also gonna be artifact talents that we're gonna have, and there's also gonna be rework talents, lots of rework talents from what they said, 2/3 of the talents, but we'll see how that's gonna work out. But anyway, so with that said, let's take a look first of all at the blood gameplay. So we have kind of like a blood strike, and that's more like a plague strike, because it applies old school plague strike will applies the blood plague on the target. That does minor shadow damage, but it also heals the target for 1% of their max health every 3 seconds. Now let's jump into the actual Dust and Decay right over here. Dust and Decay puts a shit on the ground, and your blood strikes hits every single target. From what I understand and reading here is that when you do that and you apply multiple blood strikes, like just AoE wise, imagine how much healing can a Blood Dust Knight have. Literally, if we were talking about the 5 targets here, or if you just even tab Blood Strike, 5 targets having Blood Plague on them will heal Death Knight for 5% of their HP every 3 seconds, and that is pretty massive, my friends. Especially in a world of Legion, where there's not going to be any proc trinkets, any activated trinkets, meaning the damage is going to be normalized, there's not going to be spikes and bursts or anything else like that. What is going to happen is that it's actually going to be legitimately tons of survivability. With that said, we're going to move on to the second ability here, is that it's a Marrow Rend. 2 runes, strike, deals a strong physical damage. By strong physical damage, it should be strong, but not like, oh my god, seriously big. And then obviously it surrounds the... It procs basically a Bone Shield with the 3 charges on the Blood Death Knight. Each attack will consume the Bone Shield charge, but from what I understand, even if it works just like the old school Bone Shield does, where each charge has a limit to how much charges get consumed. So maybe they get consumed not every second, maybe like every 2 or 3 seconds. So this Bone Shield will actually legitimately can last up to anywhere from 6 to 9 seconds. So let's say if the rogue auto attacks, do 2 auto attacks, and then procs the freaking like eviscerate on the target, it's not gonna consume whole 3 charges of the Bone Shield with just a 2 auto attacks. It's just gonna consume 1 charge essentially. So with that said, the second one we have is Death Strike. It requires 40 runic power, and from what I understand, Death Strike becomes blood specific, so that's a bit of a survivability loss, but we'll see what they're gonna and how they're gonna come up and make it up. Legitimately think it's a good changes. So the Death Strike here is the old school kind of a Cataclysm Death Strike, where it heals for 50% of the damage taken in the last 6 seconds, minimum of 7% of the HP, and if you're below 35%, it consumes all the runic power and increases the potency of the healing effect, which is actually pretty good. Mastery is a Blood Shield, basically increases attack power, making Blood Dust Knight hit like a truck or semi-truck. And then obviously we have also each time it increases the Death Strike healing as well here. So basically from the rotation here we see is that the good Blood Death Knights in PvE most likely are gonna be kind of a balancing tipping toe between keeping their Blood Strike, Blood Plague active on as many targets as possible, having your Bone Shield for as long as possible as well, and to consume their runic power they're gonna do Death Strikes. Also noted to say here, because only for Unholy it says it has a Death Coil, that means that the Blood Death Knight is actually gonna lose Death Coil as well, and that Death Strike is gonna be the only rune spender. Obviously there's going to be a lot more talents, but one of the talents here is that he's going to do Motor Rend, where he whirlwinds, hits 3 times a second, minor shadow damage, but hits 3 times a second, he'll have 1% of the maximum health per strike. Meaning that if there will be, like I say, Bloodless Knight fighting Unholy, he will be healing 6% a second. And that's pretty big actually. It also consumes 15 runic power per second, so if he basically does the full runic power, which is 100, he'll make 6 ticks of it. 6 seconds whirlwind. With that said, 6 seconds is essentially we're talking about 6% heal a second, 3% per target, 6% total. If Bloodless Knight whirlwind on 2 targets or just as 1 target with a pet, he will literally heal for 6% a second, and over 6 seconds he'll heal 36% of his HP, and that's every 1 minute cooldown. So there's a huge healing potential for the Bloodless Knight over here as well. Also noted to say, keep in mind that Gorfin's Grasp will work wonderfully with the Death Knight, even in PvP, because if, let's say, Bloodless Knight gets focused really hard and he can just Bone Storm whenever he gets focused, or grip as many people possible, put Dust Decay, grip as many people possible, and then do a Blood Strike to apply Blood Plague on the multiple targets, and on top of it also Storm, he will be undying. So Bloodless Knights also get pretty cool changes. So first of all, Killing Machine finally only affects ability rate, which is kind of a quality of life change here. And then Rime is also ability rate has 45% chance to make your next Howling Blast free and does 300% more damage. Howling Blast itself sees here, you see how it does minor, focus on minor frost damage, but it does give them fuck tons of runic power. So when they affect Frost Fever, so yeah, looks like they're only gonna have 1 disease, which is Frost Fever, and they will give him fuck tons of runic power, kind of what a Necrotic Plague was back in the day, in the beginning of the Warlords of Draenor. So from here, what I can say is that if Howling Blast procs on 5 targets, Bloodless Knight will have essentially unlimited amount of pull. Also, it doesn't say here that they generate any runic power abilities, but then here it says your Howling Blast will consume no rune and generate no runic power, meaning that these abilities will still obliterate in Howling Blast, generate the runic power. So overall it's the same thing. Noted one change is instead of Dust and Decay, Bloodless Knight is gonna get Remorseless Winter, which is pretty freaking awesome. I think it's a great change. Remorseless Winter never really gained a lot of love when it comes to competitive PvP theme, so here it actually belongs pretty well. And then we have a Glacial Advance. Every 12 seconds he kind of puts a spike, it's the spikes either flies or tunnels under the ground, and then impales people for moderate frost damage. And it's done every 12 seconds. So this is a ranged ability, as far as I understand. Howling Blast is going to be ranged ability too. That, yeah, here it says advance forward, the dealing strike. So with that said, is Bloodless Knight with a Chillblade's Chain of Ice might set up such a nice range damage, which actually will help him a lot because Bloodless Knights do get kited quite a bit. The rotation does seem a little bit on a more of a simpler terms, but not as much. It does seem like the rotation actually gets a little bit more complicated to kind of a tally back between the Frost Strikes, between the Rime procs, between the Obliterates, between the Howling Blasts, because the Howling Blast says here it does very minor frost damage. So until you get the procs on it, it doesn't make sense to spam Howling Blast like it used to be back in the old day. So the 300% damage increase is actually very good because it kind of lowers the damage over all of the Howling Blasts until you get those Rime procs. So with that said, what it looks like, actually I'm gonna do that at the end of the video. Now, Unholy, my friends, hell yeah. So let's talk about the Outbreak. This is one of the highest awesomest ability of the Death Knight, and that requires decent amount of skill cap, in my opinion, awareness, and at the same time, here, this is gonna be our bread and butter for the most cases. So, what Outbreak does, you put a debuff on a target, and that debuff infects everybody around the Death Knight with a Virulent Plague. That Virulent Plague does moderate shadow damage, focus on the moderate, compared to the weak minor damage of the Blood Plague, minor damage of the Frost Fever. This will do moderate damage. But that moderate damage is not the most moderate out of them all, because it also has a 30% chance to erupt and deal damage across that. Sort of like a Wandering Plague back in the Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm days. So that's actually pretty good. So with that said, where is this going to be applicable? Well, obviously in RBGs, we will probably use it off the cooldown. Let's say we have a couple melees, put Auto Break on them. We have a couple range in the back, put it on them. We have a few killers clogging up out there, put it on them as well, which is pretty cool. Festering Strike is also getting a rework. It's basically applies 1 to 3 festering wounds. It no longer prolongs our diseases. It just applies 1 to 3 festering wounds, and those 1 to 3 festering wounds basically can be detonated by Scorch Strike. Now, Festering Strike does massive, focus on that, massive damage here, massive physical damage, and Scorch Strike does strong damage, shadow, and strong physical. So with that said, I think that the 2 Scorch Strikes with the 2 Festering Wounds explosions will do more damage than the Festering Strike. Otherwise, when we don't have the Festering Wounds on the target, then the Festering Strike will be the way to go. Death Call remains the same, except it does restore energy to the ghoul. Now, here's the focus. Energy restores to the ghoul. Maybe that the energy consumption abilities by the ghoul would actually be worth too. Sudden Doom is the same mechanic, but Dark Transformation here, it's a 1 minute cooldown. It used to not have a cooldown, now it has a 1 minute cooldown. It's a 20 seconds, transforms your ghoul into powerful undead monstrosity. Ghoul abilities are empowered and take on the new functions while the transformation is active. Hopefully they're going to be reworking it, because right now the ghoul transformation is kind of a lackluster. It's kind of just a bit of a buffer to existing abilities. But this is possibly actually going to go way above and beyond that, and hopefully the ghouls during the transformations will actually do really good damage, or will have some awesome utilities baked into them, more than what they are now. So this is actually also very interesting to say. Obviously, we want to get to the 100 runic power first, transform our ghoul, or transform our ghoul maybe in the beginning of the fight, to be honest. Transform in the beginning of the fight, build up runic power, have the ghoul start wasting their energy, and as we build up runic power from Outbreak, Festering Strike, and Scourge Strike, proc a few death calls so your transformed ghoul will do more damage. Obviously it doesn't make sense to wasting a lot of your death calls while your ghoul is not transformed, because you wanna to get a full effect of the extra energy for your ghoul is to actually death coil when it's going to be enraged. Dust and Decay, this is another thing. Corrupts the target underneath the desk, does moderate shadow damage. While remaining in the target area, your Scourge Strike hits all enemies. That's freaking huge. Why? Well, because first of all, Virulent Plague explodes and does more damage. Now, if we're fighting against a TSG, for example, in 3v3, and you apply Virulent Plague, and it pretty much kind of like spreads this disease between the 2 targets, 2 melees, they're both gonna be proccing that Virulent Plague and both gonna be damaging itself. But then when they connect on a target, you can easily pop a Dust and Decay on top of it, roll 3 to 4 different Scourge Strikes, and do a massive AoE damage. Now the mastery remains the same, and then this one too. You summon the second ghoul, and your cooldown on your ghoul summon gets removed. This is interesting, but honestly, from my experience, I'd rather actually put more talents and talent points into damage for my diseases, into damage for my coils and my abilities, than have it for the ghoul. It's just kind of from my own personal perspective, because the ghouls doesn't always connect. The ghouls get frozen. They don't get dispelled by healers because they'd rather dispel something else. So with that said, ghoul and decay usually don't get connected quite often, and when that does not happen, you lose a lot of damage. So putting a lot of effort and resources to making your ghouls powerful is not the best way of doing it, because it's easily stopped. So with that said, questions. What happened to the Icy Touch? Because I don't want to lose offensive dispel. What happens to Chain of Ice? What happened to the old diseases? Those are the diseases. This looks like what they made here is that each class just gonna have its own one disease, each spec. But with that said, is then the Chain of Ice, do we still keep it? And if we keep it, does a Chain of Ice essentially not gonna proc any diseases? That would be my guess essentially here. What happens to the Icy Touch? So with that said, there's quite a few things, like I said, not enough information, literally. With that said let's talk about one change. When we looked previous in the video where it says Necrotic Strike gonna replace a Scourge Strike, well, what happens is, if it replaces it, which is fine, but will the Necrotic Strike still trigger the Festering Wounds or not? That's the first question. Second is, with the Dust and Decay, can the Necrotic affect multiple targets at the same time? And if it can, dear baby Jesus, my friends, can you imagine that for a second? Dust and Decay on the ground, Gorfin's Grasp, and do like 5 to 6 freaking necrotic stacks on the entire 5 people group. That could be very strong. Now with the whole theme what I'm seeing here is that Frost obviously have still solid single target damage abilities. A humongous single target damage capability here. Unholy still have some, most of its damage kind of spread between diseases. I'm not sure what they're doing with the pet. I'd rather actually not see a lot of pet damage personally here. But Unholy will do decent damage, but Frost is definitely going to be doing way more damage than single target than Frost. Which is always was the case, but Frost will get their necrotics, which is actually going to be, Unholy will get their necrotics, which is probably going to equalize to specs. But with that said, what am I thinking here? Blood here gets a very, very strong sustained healing capability. Sustained healing and sustained AoE damage. Between the Dust and Decay, Blood Strike, between the freaking... It's kind of a sustain on a higher bit of a burst, because there is a Bone Storm ability. There is Dust and Decay Blood Strike capability as well. Frost is more going to be about the sustained damage, AoE sustained damage. All of the Death Knights are going to be very, very AoE dependent classes. But when we're looking at the Frost here, the Frost will have the Glacial Advance, will do AoE damage, but they're also going to be Howling Blast. But they cannot spam it because they'd rather do it with a Rhyme and use Obliterate in the meantime. So with that said, and Remorseless Winter is good, but it's also easily kitable. It's only 10 yards range. It's still going to be pretty decent. But with that said, it looks like the Frost just have a very, very consistent proc-based AoE damage. Alright, so they do Obliterate into Howling Blast, Obliterate into Howling Blast again, so every 3 seconds they can do it in the best case scenario for strong Howling Blast damages, but that's usually not going to happen. With a 45% chance, 2 Obliterates, let's say proc 1 Howling Blast, so there will be some of a diminishing ramp up time here, and then they're going to do Glacial Advance and Remorseless Winter, so decent AoE damage between the Howling Blast, Frost Fever, but more of sustain, where Unholy can set it up where it grips people, does 6 freaking Scourge Strikes on necrotics to the entire freaking group, and at the same time every single group will gonna be affected by Valyrian Plague that will be causing minor explosion and minor damages that will be feedbacking off each target. So with that said, Unholy can set up very, very, very nasty AoE damage capability, which is going to be pretty awesome. So overall, I think the changes that I'm making, I'm very, very, very satisfied with that. I think it's great, but I want to leave it on one note. Not enough information yet. We'll see what they're going to be doing in the future. Thank you guys for watching, my friends. Let me know how you like this video, and see you guys later. До свидания.